Hello, children. The poem which we are going to discuss today is A Legend of the Northland. Legend is an old story, an old traditional story which has come down to you from your forefathers. Such a story is called legend. And such stories actually are sung and they are in the form of ballad. I will show you, just see here on the screen what is a ballad. You can understand, I'm reading here. A ballad is a song narrating a story in short stanzas. So, ballad is a song, it's a poem, okay, and it is narrating a story. That means a legendary story is narrated in the form of a song. That is called ballad. Okay, there are short stanzas, and ballads are a part of folk culture. Folk culture means the in the rural area they sing the songs and tell the old traditional stories. So that is the culture in the village. The folk people, the countryside people sing and they pass it on to the coming generations. So are a part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. They are in the oral form. There is not necessary that there should be a written script of such ballads. So they are called the songs or the ballads. They are sung. They are, you might have seen the opera, in the form of opera. They are sung and they are dramatized sometimes. Okay, so Legend of Northland is a ballad. Okay, now let us come to this point. I'll just show you on the screen. You can see here, just you see here, a Legend of the Northland. So Northland, which area is called Northland? Okay, so Northland actually is the peninsula containing Norway and Sweden and the far north Canada. Okay, so that region is called Northland. I'll just show you, and you'll understand. In this picture, you can see this is the map of Europe, and this is Norway. This green color you can see here in the map. This is Norway, and this yellowish color, this brownish yellow color you can see, and that is Sweden. So this region is called as Northland, and the northernmost parts of Canada. In this map, you can see here, isn't it? The far north Canada, these parts, as you can see in this map, these are these parts are the parts of Northland. Okay, and there are other pictures. Is here you see the other pictures are there, and you see these the animals which are found there are just the reindeers. As you can see here, reindeers and this polar bear. So reindeer is the animal, and reindeer is used for harnessing uh, a cart, and that cart is called sledge. So for pulling sledge, reindeers are used in the Northland, and these are the animals which can, this polar bear and reindeer, etc. And the seal fish also is found there. These are the animals or creatures which are found in the Northland. So you can see here, this sledge is a cart without wheels. Okay, wheel-less cart. It is pulled by reindeer, and this is the reindeer as you can see in this picture. So this is Northland, and this area is snow covered most of the months in the year. There is no summer season, as you can see in here in our areas. Okay, most of the time it is very cold, extremely cold and snow covered. So winters are very very long, and so called summer, actually they are not summer, but so called summer they are short, and the temperature is little higher, not as high as we have here, isn't it? So this is about the Northland. Okay, so I have told you what is a legend and what is Northland, and you understood. This poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. This is important. Greed is important because this is the theme of the poem. As I have written here, you can see the theme. The theme of the poem is selfishness and greed. How a little woman angers Saint Peter. Saint Peter was apostle of Jesus Christ. He was the message carrier of Jesus Christ. He spread the message of Jesus Christ on earth, and he went on preaching in the world, preaching the teachings of Jesus Christ. So he was an apostle. Apostle in Christianity they call it apostle of Jesus Christ, Saint Peter. Okay, and this theme, the how the old lady shows her greed and selfishness, how she displays it, and how Saint Peter gets extremely angry and how he curses her. That all we will see in the poem, and you will understand this theme very well. Well, so let us go to the first stanza and start discussing the poem. Okay. As you can see, these stanzas here, my dear boys and girls. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So, Northland area, which is the farthermost area in the globe, and the regions which I have just shown you, and you understood. Okay, so away in Northland, where the hours of the day are few, most of the time it is night there because these regions are near to the pole, and as from equator, which is 0 degree latitude, you go northwards, isn't it? There the nights are longer and days are shorter. In geography you have learned that on the equator there is 12-hour day and 12-hour night almost the whole year. But in the north, where the sun rays hardly reach there, most of the months in the year are the winter season, where the hours of the day are few. So most of the time there is night. Okay, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So in the nights are very long. They can't go on sleeping uh, the whole night, even if it's dark. They get up and start doing their work because how long they will sleep? There is a limit. Okay, so longer nights and very very shorter days. This is how the climate of the Northland is. And there in the second instance, you see where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. Okay, there they harness. Harness, actually, harness means control and make use of something. Harnessing, tying the animal uh, with a rope and just, using it in pulling the cart, sledge, particularly here, the reindeers, they are pulling the sledge. That's called harnessing. So, harnessing means controlling and making use of something for some particular purpose. Here, for the purpose of pulling the cart, the wheelless cart or cart without wheel, that is called sledge. So where they means people harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry coats. Here the poet has used the poetic device. You can understand there is a comparison, so it is simile. The children are compared to the bears' clubs, so it is a simile which the poetic device the poet has used. Okay, the children look the like the bear's cubs, young ones, offsprings of bear, because they are putting on funny furry clothes. Okay, and one more thing I would like to tell you, my dear boys and girls. This is the first stanza. The rhyming scheme I have written here. You see, A B C B. So Northland is A, few is B, Winter is C and through is B again. This few and through, these two words are vibrating together. So there is, it is B and it is B. The same rhyming scheme is followed in the other stanzas of the poem. Okay. So now, just now you understood the second stanza. Okay. Now let us go to the third stanza. So the poet says, they, so in the Northland, they tell them a curious story. That means the people tell their children a curious means a strange story. I don't believe it's true. The poet herself doesn't believe the story to be a true one. It's a legend, okay? And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Tale means a story. The poet says that if she tells this story or this tale to you, you may learn a lesson. There is a moral lesson hidden in the story, and that's why I'm going to tell this story to you, she says. Okay, now she begins this story from this stanza. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, you know. So, when Saint Peter lived on earth, on the earth, in the world below means world below is this mortal world, earth, and world above is the immortal world, heaven. Okay, so when Saint Peter was incarnated on this earth, okay, and he carried the message of Jesus Christ from door to door, preaching. He moved around preaching, okay, the spreading the message of Jesus Christ, okay, and walked about it preaching just as he did, you know. So while walking and preaching the teachings of Jesus Christ, what happened, you know? He came to the door of a cottage. Cottage, you know, village cottages, the house with the sloping roof, tiles and beams, you know, the cottages. You have seen the images and the real cottages also you have seen. So he came to the door of a cottage in traveling around the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Hearth is a stove. This is the stove where they use the charcoal. Okay. So she goes to a cottage, and there a little woman was there, and she was making cakes. She was baking them on the hearth. On the hearth means the stove with where they use the coal for cooking purpose. Okay, she was doing it, and Saint Peter goes there, and he saw her there. Okay, and being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. Okay, so how was his condition, physical condition? He was faint. Faint means weak. Okay, why was he weak? Fasting. Okay, for the day was almost done. How long had he been fasting? For the day was almost done means the day was almost over. It was almost evening at that time. Okay, so the whole day he had been fasting. He had not eaten anything since morning. Okay, so he felt very weak. Okay, weak and dull. So he asked her from her store of cakes. Store means many cakes already she had already baked and stored them. Okay, just on the ota just beside her. Okay, so she had baked many cakes. So from the store of her cakes, he asks a single one. He says, "You just give me a single, only one cake will do, not more than that." He asks for, and she had many cakes with her. Okay, then what happens? Let us see in the next stanza. See, so whatever cakes she had baked, she doesn't give any cake from her store. What she does, she prepares the fresh cake for Saint Peter. She doesn't know that he is the apostle of Christ. He is Saint Peter. She doesn't know. She doesn't know. She thinks or she takes him for a stranger, anybody, a beggar who came begging um, at her door. She thinks he might be anybody like that. Okay, so she made a very little cake But as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. So she baked one little cake, and and when it was ready, when it was baked, she found it is very large, and I shouldn't give it to this beggar, Saint Peter. She didn't know that he was Saint Peter. I shouldn't give it to him, she thought. Okay. So what she does next, this is in the second stanza, and this is the next stanza. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. So now she needs. Kneading means, you are mixing this water in this flour, okay, and you are just beating it. That's called kneading, and that's used for making a cake. So she needed another and still a smaller one. So first cake she had needed in the previous stanza we have seen. So it looked very large. So didn't give it to Saint Peter. And now in this stanza, second cake she bakes for him. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. That means second cake also looked as large as the first one. Okay, when it was ready. Well, then what she does? Next stanza. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough. Dough means, as I have just said, this flour and water is mixed and it is semi-solid. That is dough. It is used for making cakes, chapatis. Then she took a tiny means very, very little, tiny, even smaller than the little, tiny. Hmm. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. Okay, so she took another scrap means small piece, lump of dough. Okay, small lump of dough she took and rolled it flat. For rolling, what is used? You call it chakla belan. In Hindi, you call it chakla belan. Actually, there is no exact English word for that, but they call the rolling board and rolling pin. This rolling board is chakla and belan is rolling pin. Okay, so using them, she rolled another this cake. Okay, so rolling on the rolling using the rolling pin on the rolling board, chakla belan. She rolled another scrape of tiny dough and made another cake. So third cake she's making now, you see here, and she baked it thin as a wafer. Thin as a wafer. Again, here the poet has used the poetic device simile. Wafer is very thin. Okay, wafers which you eat, just like potato chips, they look. Okay, so the like them the cake she prepared. Okay, and baked it thin as a wafer. Here again, as I have told, the simile is the poetic device which is used here because there is comparison. The these cakes are compared to the wafer, but she couldn't part with that. She baked the third cake. It was very thin like a wafer, but when it was ready, she thought again it is very large. How could I give it to this beggar, Saint Peter? She couldn't part with it. So now here, you see in these three stanzas, you see the greed of that lady to its extreme. She was extremely selfish and greedy. Okay, that becomes very clear in the next stanza. You see, for she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. She says, then when I eat the cake myself, they look very small. But when I have to give them to anybody else, they look very large. This is the extreme of greed and selfishness. She is thinking of herself. She is very selfish. She is not thinking of the others. And this is the core part of the theme of this poem. Okay, as I had said earlier that I will be you will be able to understand the theme when we discuss the poem. So here you understand it. Okay, so she is selfish because she is thinking of herself, not thinking of anybody, not thinking of others in the same manner as she thinks of herself. Okay, she takes care of herself, not of anybody else's. So, and she's greedy also. She doesn't want to part with anything. She doesn't want to part with the cake which she has prepared. Okay, greedy and selfish behavior of that lady. Okay, then the next stanza, you see, as a result of that, as a result, what is the consequence or the result of her greed? Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Provoke means you instigate somebody, you speak or do something which prompts him to act against you or say something instinctively. That's called provoking. Okay, so Saint Peter was provoked by the greed of that lady. When he saw that lady is extremely greedy and selfish, so he was provoked and he got extremely angry. Okay, a good Saint Peter grew angry for there are two reasons, you see. Because he was hungry and faint. Faint means weak. He was feeling very dull and weak, and he was hungry since morning. He had not eaten anything. Okay, and that the conduct or the behavior of that little woman, I mean, added fuel to the fire. Okay, that selfish and greedy behavior. When he saw, he became furious. He became extremely angry. Okay, because of her behavior. So because he was hungry and faint, and because of that old woman's behavior, for these two reasons, he became very angry. Okay, then what happens next? Let us see what happens next. And he said, he means Saint Peter said, you are far too selfish. Selfish, important word. You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form. To dwell means to live in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. That means you are not fit to be a human being. You have no qualities of compassion and kindness and care for the others. These human virtues or qualities you don't have at all. So you shouldn't. You're not fit to live in a human form. You don't have any humane qualities in you. Saint Peter says you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, so you shouldn't live in this human body, he says. Okay, and as we see, as we read in the stories, that such saints, they had supernatural power. They could do anything. So let us see what Saint Peter does to the lady, and it is very interesting, and it has a very good moral lesson for the children like you, and for anybody. Okay, of course. So to have both food and shelter. Humans have food and shelter, and they are very happy. Birds and animals, they go on roaming, moving here and there for food and shelter. But humans don't. They have food and shelter. And fire to keep you warm. You cook your food on fire. Birds and animals don't. They eat anywhere. Okay. So he was angry and he says, you shouldn't have this human form. You shouldn't get food and shelter. And you shouldn't get fire to keep you warm. All these things should be snatched immediately from you. This is what he says, and now he is going to curse the lady. And now, what he curses, now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Scanty means very little in amount or quantity. Scanty food. So he curses the lady, that little woman. He curses that little woman who was very selfish and greedy, he curses. Saint Peter curses them and says, "You shall build as birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring, boring, and boring all day in the hard, dry wood." That means you will have to bore the hard wood of tree trunk to get your food, and to make a shelter for yourself you have to bore the wood, the hard trunk of the wood. You have seen the birds, they are just moving. Woodpecker bird, it's moving on the hard wood, okay, on the trunk. It is just walking on it, okay, and it is boring and trying to find the something to eat, some food he's searching for, okay, and he bores and he makes hole and he lives there, lays eggs and hatches them. So this is the life of a bird, any bird. Here the example is that of woodpecker in this poem. Well, then what happens as he has cursed the lady? That is in the next stanza. Then up she went through the chimney. Chimney, you know, just funnel like structure on your fireplace. So she goes up the chimney. Okay, then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. So by the magical power, by the spiritual power of Saint Peter, that selfish lady was turned into a woodpecker. He turned her into a woodpecker by his spiritual power. Because he was angry, he cursed, and the lady became, as soon as he uttered the word, the lady became a woodpecker, and she climbed up and out on the top of the chimney. She flew away in the form of a woodpecker. Okay, this is what happens to the lady, that greedy lady. Now let us go to the next stanza, and that is the appearance of the woodpecker in this stanza. You will find, okay, she had a scarlet. Actually, the scarlet is brilliant red color. Brilliant red color. She had a scarlet cap on her head. When Saint Peter uttered the words of curse to her, she was wearing a scarlet color cap on her head. Okay, so she had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same. So if you might have seen a woodpecker, the woodpecker has a scarlet color, brilliant red color crown on its head. The cock also has a crown. Woodpecker also has a red color, that is a brilliant red color crown. So there is the cap of that lady. Okay, so it was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burnt black as the coal in the flame. So in the flame of the stove, and in the heat, of that this chimney, and inside the chimney there is soot, that black substance which settles on the walls of the chimney. That black substance blackened the lady, and she got black color. You can just think like this, okay? So but all the rest of her clothes were burnt black as coal in the flame. Down there is a flame, and up there is soot, black soot. So because of that that flame and black soot, the lady became black in color. That woodpecker became black in color. So the woodpecker is a bird which has black color, and it has a scarlet cap or a scarlet crown on its head. So this is what the lady became. That lady is now in the form of woodpecker. This is what the legend says. Okay, and then the last stanza, my dear boys and girls. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day. boring and boring for food. So now, as she has been turned into a woodpecker, she flew away and she started living in the wood. And when the school children went to school, they saw her. They saw that woodpecker, and the woodpecker they saw that it is boring and boring for her food in the tree trunks, searching food in the tree trunks. Okay, and she lives in the trees even today. This is what the legend or the old story tells you. So this is the poem, my dear boys and girls, and as you can see here, this is the name of the poet, Phoebecary. The pronunciation is Phoebe Cary. Phoebe Cary. She was an American poet who was born in 1822 and died in 1871. So this is all about this poem and the important points which we have discussed now. Other things you can elaborate. If any question is there, you can ask me anytime. So that's all for today. Have a nice time. Thank you very much.